Have you ever wondered why there comes a moment in a woman's life when everything she once relied on stops working? When every voice around her grows faint and the only direction that remains is upward? What if the season that feels like abandonment is actually the divine moment when God is teaching her to walk only with Him? There is a sacred shift that happens inside a woman's soul when God begins to detach her from the noise, the expectations, the disappointments, and the fragile foundations she once stood on. It often begins quietly, almost imperceptibly, like a gentle pull you cannot explain. People fade, desires change, and the heart starts hungering for something deeper, something eternal. It is not weakness. It is awakening. When a woman reaches this threshold, she is not losing her way. She is stepping into the path God crafted long before she understood her own name. And while the world may interpret her solitude as isolation, heaven recognizes it as consecration. God begins to strip away the illusions she believed would hold her together. He removes attachments that drained her spirit, silences voices that diluted her purpose, and breaks patterns that kept her dependent on human reassurance. This is where the journey of divine walking begins, a journey where faith becomes her compass and God becomes her only solid ground. In this sacred breaking, she discovers something she never expected. The strength she sought in others was always meant to come from Him. The peace she tried to negotiate through people can only flow from His presence, and the validation she longed for in earthly relationships is replaced by the steady, unwavering assurance of being held by God Himself. This shift does not happen by accident. It happens when her spirit finally recognizes that walking with God is not a consolation prize, but the highest calling of her heart. And maybe you felt this stirring too. Maybe life has nudged you into a season where the familiar has vanished, not to punish you but to position you. You already sense that something divine is unfolding, that God is drawing you into a deeper walk, a more intimate dependence, a sacred clarity that will redefine who you are becoming. You have felt the pull, the disconnect, the quiet transformation that cannot be explained in human terms. And if you have, stay with me, because what you are about to discover may shift your entire understanding of this journey. Before we continue, tell me in the comments if you have ever felt God leading you away from what once felt safe. Your experience matters, and it helps others feel seen. And if this opening resonates with you, make sure you leave a like and check whether you are subscribed to the channel, because what comes next may speak directly to the season you are living right now, guiding you into the deeper purpose God is unfolding in your life. As a woman begins to walk only with God, one of the first experiences she encounters is the unsettling silence that surrounds her. It is a silence that does not announce itself loudly, yet it reshapes everything inside her. What once offered comfort feels distant. What once provided clarity becomes uncertain, and the voices she depended on gradually lose their influence. This silence is not emptiness. It is divine interruption. It is the moment when God begins to loosen the ties that once held her, not because they were all harmful, but because they were never meant to guide her destiny. In this sacred quiet, she realizes that God's silence often speaks louder than His words. It is in this space that she starts recognizing how deeply she leaned on human reassurance, how often she looked for answers in people who were never meant to carry the weight of her soul, and how easily the noise of the world drowned out the whisper of heaven. God is not disconnecting her to punish her. He is disconnecting her to redirect her. The relationships that once felt essential begin to feel misaligned. The conversations that once fueled her now drain her spirit. The environments that once felt familiar now feel foreign. This internal shift is evidence that God is preparing her for something greater, When God pulls a woman into divine silence, He is not pushing her away, He is inviting her inward. It is in this space that she starts discerning the difference between emotional dependence and spiritual alignment. She discovers that not every attachment can walk with her into the future God is shaping. Some connections were seasonal, some were distractions, and some were simply too small for the call on her life. The silence clarifies what noise once concealed. She begins to see who truly nourishes her spirit and who only consumes her energy. The clarity is often painful, yet it is liberating. And as she walks through this quiet transformation, she learns to trust God in ways she never had to before. She begins to sense that His silence does not mean His absence. Rather, it signals His intention. He is drawing her away from the approval that clouded her vision, from the expectations that weakened her identity, and from the attachments that kept her anchored to a version of herself she had already outgrown. In this sacred separation, something powerful emerges. She begins to crave God's presence more than human comfort. She seeks His guidance above all other voices, because she knows that only He can carry her through the next season. This silence becomes the soil where her new identity takes root. The stillness becomes the space where old versions of herself fall away. And though she may not yet understand the full purpose of this divine quiet, her spirit knows she is being led, shaped, and prepared for a depth she has never experienced before. And this quiet, this separation, this shift is only the beginning of a journey that will reveal why God chose to walk so closely with her. As God continues to lead a woman into deeper waters, there comes a moment when her soul awakens to a truth she once resisted. Not everyone can walk with her on the path God is shaping. This realization is not born from pride, but from clarity. There is a divine separation that occurs when a woman begins to walk only with God, a separation that reveals who is aligned with her spiritual growth and who is tied only to her past. It is in this unfolding process that she begins to discern the difference between companionship and attachment, between support and dependency, between presence and purpose. At first, this awareness can feel confusing. She may look at relationships she once cherished and wonder why the connection feels strained. She may revisit conversations that once brought comfort, but now feel empty. She may try to fit into environments where her spirit no longer feels at home. These shifts are not signs of failure. They are signs of spiritual elevation. The higher God calls her, the fewer voices can accompany her. The deeper God takes her, the more He must filter what surrounds her. It is not abandonment, it is refinement. As she walks through this inner stretching, she begins to understand why certain friendships grew distant, why certain relationships dissolved, and why certain people who once felt essential became temporary chapters. God is not removing people arbitrarily. He is protecting what He is building within her. Some individuals cannot nurture the faith rising inside her. Others cannot understand the spiritual hunger that now shapes her decisions. And some, though well-intentioned, cannot perceive the direction God is taking her because their vision is limited to the natural, while she is being led by the spiritual. This recognition becomes a turning point. She stops forcing what no longer aligns. She stops chasing what resists her growth. She stops apologizing for choosing the path that God is illuminating before her. And as she releases these weights, she discovers a freedom she had been longing for without ever naming it. It is the freedom of being led by God alone, unburdened by expectations that once kept her anchored to a version of herself she was never meant to remain. In this unfolding, she also recognizes that some people were never meant to walk with her. They were meant to awaken her. They entered her life to reveal her strength, to shape her discernment, or to expose areas God needed to heal. Their presence had purpose, but their season had an end, And as she accepts this truth, her spirit grows lighter, her vision sharper, and her inner peace deeper. This sacred recognition does not close her heart. It clarifies it. It teaches her to love without clinging, to release without resentment, and to walk forward without fear. Because now she understands, when God is leading, separation is not loss, separation is alignment. And with each step she takes on this newly revealed journey, she senses more clearly that God is preparing her for something that requires her full dependence, her refined discernment, and her undivided heart. As a woman continues to walk away from what no longer aligns with her spirit, she begins to notice subtle yet unmistakable signs that God is guiding her path in ways she once overlooked. These signs do not always appear in dramatic moments or loud interventions. More often, they emerge quietly, through inner tension, unexpected clarity, closed opportunities, and a growing sense of spiritual discomfort when she tries to remain where God is no longer leading her. This redirection is one of the clearest indicators that God is not just present in her life, He is actively shaping her destiny. At first, she may resist these signs, trying to hold on to the familiar, convincing herself that she can balance her old rhythms with the new spiritual call rising within her. But the more God pulls her forward, the more the past loses its hold. Conversations that once energized her now feel out of sync. Environments that once seemed harmless now feel spiritually draining. Even her own desires begin to shift, aligning with a deeper longing she cannot quite explain. This internal rearranging is not random. It is a divine restructuring that prepares her for the next stage of her journey. One of the most powerful signs of God's redirection is the sudden collapse of what she believed was stable. Opportunities she relied on fall apart. Plans she carefully built crumble. People she counted on step back. Yet beneath the surface of these losses lies a higher orchestration. God is not taking things from her. He is clearing space. He is removing what cannot sustain her calling. He is closing doors that would have hindered her growth. He is silencing voices that would have diluted her identity. And though the process feels unsettling, there is a supernatural peace beneath it that whispers, even in the confusion, that she is being led somewhere purposeful. Another sign emerges through conviction. Not guilt, not fear, but a gentle, persistent nudge in her spirit that tells her when she is out of alignment. It is the feeling she gets when she stays too long in a place she has outgrown, or when she entertains relationships that drain her soul rather than elevate her faith. This conviction is not condemnation, it is guidance. It is God protecting her heart, redirecting her steps, and strengthening her discernment. And slowly, she begins to realize that every disruption, every shift, every unexpected turn has been God's way of steering her toward a path she would not have chosen on her own, a path where her dependence deepens, her clarity sharpens, and her connection to Him becomes unbreakable. Redirection is not rejection. It is the divine map unfolding, one step at a time, leading her into a season where her walk with God becomes the anchor of her identity. If you feel these signs in your own life, share in the comments which ones resonate with you most. Your words may help someone who is learning to recognize God's redirection as part of her own journey. As a woman surrenders more deeply to God's leading, she begins to experience a transformation that cannot be seen on the surface, but is profoundly felt within her soul. This inner change is subtle at first, appearing in the way she perceives herself, her relationships, and her purpose. It is as if her spirit has been reshaped, refined, and clarified, guided by an unseen hand that removes what no longer serves the divine calling on her life. Every disappointment, every closed door, every moment of solitude becomes part of a sacred process designed to align her heart, mind, and soul with God's perfect timing and plan. She begins to notice that her desires shift. The things that once drew her attention now feel insignificant, and she discovers a new hunger for spiritual depth, wisdom, and intimacy with God. Activities, conversations, and even relationships that once seemed vital begin to fade in importance. This is not detachment from life. It is a reorientation toward divine alignment. Her choices become less influenced by the approval or expectations of others, and more guided by a quiet conviction in her heart that only God can provide clarity, direction, and true fulfillment. At the same time, her character is being refined, patience deepens, compassion expands, and discernment grows sharper. She begins to respond to challenges differently, seeing them not as obstacles but as opportunities to learn and grow. Where she may have once reacted with anxiety, frustration, or doubt, she now moves with a sense of trust, knowing that God's plan is unfolding even when the path seems uncertain. Every trial becomes a classroom, every season of waiting a place where faith and resilience are strengthened. This transformation also impacts her relationships. She no longer seeks validation or completeness from others, but rests in the wholeness that God provides. The people who remain in her life naturally align with her spiritual walk, while others drift away, not as a loss, but as part of the divine pruning that keeps her on the path God intends. She begins to recognize that true connection comes not from proximity or familiarity, but from alignment with God's purpose and presence. In this sacred process, she starts living from a place of peace, clarity, and intentionality. Her decisions are less reactive and more guided by a deep sense of discernment. Her emotions become informed by wisdom rather than impulse, and as she continues to walk only with God, the inner transformation continues to unfold, preparing her for a life that is not merely about survival or comfort, but about fulfilling the unique destiny and calling that God has designed specifically for her. As a woman walks only with God, a remarkable strength begins to emerge, one that is invisible to the world yet deeply felt within her spirit. This strength is not built on human approval, external accomplishments, or the comfort of familiarity. It is forged in the quiet surrender to God, in the moments when she lets go of dependencies that once provided temporary relief but ultimately restricted her spiritual growth. Every step she takes away from reliance on others and toward reliance on God becomes a layer of resilience, an unshakable foundation that no storm can erode. She starts to notice how often she previously leaned on people to validate her worth, to stabilize her emotions, or to solve her problems. These crutches, though comforting in the moment, limited her vision and delayed her alignment with God's perfect plan. As she abandons them, there is an initial discomfort, a sense of vulnerability, and perhaps even fear. Yet it is precisely in this discomfort that God begins to cultivate within her a strength that cannot be borrowed or replicated. It is an enduring power that rises from dependency on the divine rather than the temporary and fallible support of humans. This invisible strength manifests in daily life as clarity of purpose, emotional stability, and spiritual discernment. She begins to navigate challenges with wisdom instead of impulsive reaction, choosing responses that align with her divine calling rather than the expectations of others. She recognizes that true security does not come from people, circumstances, or possessions, but from the unwavering presence of God in her life. Every closed door and every season of waiting becomes a stepping stone toward greater fortitude, revealing that God's timing and guidance are far more reliable than any human provision. At the same time, she discovers the freedom that comes from self-sufficiency rooted in God rather than self-reliance alone. Emotional crutches no longer dominate her decisions, and she no longer allows fear, loneliness, or longing for approval to dictate her path. Instead, her choices reflect a quiet confidence that God is with her, that His wisdom is sufficient, and that every detour, every delay, and every seeming loss serves a higher purpose. This is the kind of strength that does not seek recognition, but radiates authenticity, patience, and endurance. And as this inner power grows, she begins to sense that she is no longer moving merely to survive life's challenges. She is moving with purpose, equipped for the missions God has prepared for her. She realizes that reliance on God produces a kind of fortitude that transforms setbacks into preparation, trials into refinement, and solitude into empowerment. With every step, she experiences the invisible strengthening of her faith, heart, and spirit, a deep and lasting power that will carry her forward into the life God has uniquely designed for her. As a woman walks closely with God, she enters a season of refinement where every aspect of her life is tested, purified, and aligned with divine purpose. This is not a period of punishment, but a sacred process where God actively prunes relationships, habits, and even environments that do not serve the higher calling on her life. Every encounter, every routine, and every attachment is evaluated by the quiet yet powerful touch of God's hand. It is in this divine filtering that she begins to recognize the subtleties of spiritual alignment versus worldly convenience. The refinement process often begins with discernment. She notices patterns in her life that no longer reflect God's truth. Relationships that once seemed essential feel strained or empty. Habits that provided comfort now seem shallow or distracting. Paths that were once familiar appear blocked or misaligned. These disruptions are not coincidences, they are divine recalibrations, guiding her away from what is temporary and toward what is eternal. God's purpose is not to leave her isolated, but to equip her with the clarity and strength she will need for the greater journey ahead. Through this filtering, she learns to release what cannot walk with her spiritually. Friends who do not understand her calling naturally drift away. Environments that drain her energy or obscure her vision lose their grip on her focus. Even internalized habits, thought patterns, and emotional dependencies that once dictated her choices are exposed and surrendered to God. This refining is intentional. It strengthens her character, fortifies her faith, and sharpens her discernment so she can recognize the divine in every decision and every relationship that remains. At the same time, this process teaches her patience and trust. God's filtering may feel uncomfortable, even lonely, but it is never random. It is designed to prepare her for encounters, opportunities, and experiences that require wisdom, stability, and spiritual alignment. She begins to understand that the divine pruning is not a sign of rejection, but a sign of protection, ensuring that what remains in her life is consistent with God's plan and her ultimate purpose. This is the shaping of a woman who will not settle for temporary or superficial connections, but will be ready to receive the relationships and blessings that reflect God's design. The deeper she surrenders, the more she senses that every closed door and every redirected path carries a message from God. She begins to walk with an awareness that the refining process is creating a life built not on chance or convenience, but on divine orchestration. It is a preparation for a level of spiritual intimacy, purpose, and fulfillment that could not be achieved without this careful, sometimes challenging filtering. If you are walking through a season like this, share in the comments how you are noticing God's refinement in your own life. Your experiences can encourage and guide others who are learning to trust this sacred process. As a woman continues to surrender fully to God's guidance, a new spiritual identity begins to emerge within her. This identity is not constructed from external validation, past achievements, or human expectations. It is formed in the sacred quiet of her soul, shaped by the intimate interactions with God, and reinforced by the experiences of surrender, patience, and discernment she has cultivated along the way. She begins to perceive herself differently, not through the lens of societal approval or relational dependency, but through the perspective of divine purpose, eternal significance, and sacred alignment. This transformation begins subtly, often unnoticed at first. She discovers that the insecurities, doubts, and fears that once controlled her decisions now hold less influence. Her mind is more focused, her heart is more attuned, and her spirit resonates with a clarity that comes from walking in full alignment with God's presence. She no longer seeks to measure her worth by accomplishments or by the opinions of others. Instead, she recognizes her intrinsic value as a daughter of God, created with intention, equipped with purpose, and called into a life that reflects divine design. Her relationships, both past and present, are now interpreted through this lens of spiritual clarity. Connections that do not contribute to her growth drift away naturally, and the remaining relationships are those that resonate with her new identity, supporting her calling rather than distracting from it. She begins to interact with the world from a place of spiritual authority and wisdom rather than from neediness or fear. Even her decision-making evolves. Choices are guided not by impulse or fleeting emotion, but by a deep awareness of what aligns with God's plan for her life. With this emerging identity, she also experiences a profound sense of freedom. The weight of trying to please everyone, to secure approval, or to fill empty spaces in her heart through temporary attachments is lifted. She understands that fulfillment comes not from accumulation, status, or approval, but from a continuous, intentional walk with God. She is no longer defined by her past struggles, losses, or unfulfilled desires. She is defined by the depth of her faith, the strength of her surrender, and the purity of her alignment with God's purpose. As this spiritual identity solidifies, she begins to operate from a place of divine authority, wisdom, and peace. Her priorities become clear, her path illuminated, and her inner strength unwavering. Every choice, thought, and action reflects the spiritual maturity she has cultivated through seasons of refinement, redirection, and divine intimacy. She is no longer the same woman who began this journey. She has been reshaped, empowered, and prepared for the fullness of what God has designed for her life. And this new identity is only the beginning of a life that is guided, protected, and elevated by the divine hand that has led her every step of the way. As a woman walks in complete surrender to God, a remarkable preparation unfolds within her, shaping every aspect of her life to align with divine purpose. This preparation is both subtle and profound, manifesting in the refinement of her heart, the sharpening of her discernment, and the purification of her intentions. God begins to mold her so that she is no longer drawn to what merely satisfies temporary desires or worldly expectations. Instead, she is positioned to receive only that which comes from heaven, blessings, relationships, opportunities, and revelations that reflect the eternal plan He has for her life. During this season, every encounter, decision, and experience is calibrated by God to strengthen her readiness. She begins to notice that what once excited her now feels shallow, while moments of quiet contemplation, prayer, and alignment with God bring a sense of fulfillment deeper than anything the world can offer. The distractions that once pulled her off course gradually diminish, replaced by a focus on spiritual priorities and divine alignment. She learns to measure her choices against the standards of God's wisdom rather than human approval, understanding that not everything meant for others is meant for her, and that timing is always key in receiving what is truly intended. The preparation also touches her relationships. God begins to separate the superficial from the meaningful, the fleeting from the eternal. She no longer seeks connection for validation or emotional convenience. Instead, she waits for interactions, friendships and partnerships that resonate with her spiritual growth and God's calling. She recognizes that alignment with heaven requires patience, discernment, and the willingness to release what does not serve the greater purpose. This is not a period of deprivation, but a sacred cultivation of spiritual readiness, preparing her to embrace only those things that will complement her divine path and honor God's design. At the same time, she experiences an inner transformation that strengthens her faith and character. Challenges are reframed as lessons, delays as preparation, and moments of solitude as opportunities to deepen her intimacy with God. Every trial and every blessing alike becomes a tool in shaping her into a vessel capable of receiving what is destined for her. She learns that the right people, opportunities, and experiences will arrive in perfect timing, but only after she has been prepared to steward them with wisdom, gratitude, and devotion. Through this divine preparation, she begins to live with a sense of sacred expectation. Her heart is steady, her mind is focused, and her spirit is attuned to the whispers of heaven. She understands that the most profound blessings often come not when she is chasing them, but when God is leading her, guiding her steps, and orchestrating circumstances that align perfectly with her destiny. And as this preparation continues, she grows confident that what is coming from heaven will never just meet her desires, it will elevate her, refine her, and fulfill the purpose for which she has been called. As the journey of walking with God reaches a new depth, a woman begins to sense the fullness of the purpose behind every season of solitude, refinement, and redirection. She realizes that every closed door, every moment of waiting, every relationship that faded away, and every challenge she endured were not random events, but deliberate orchestrations of a loving God. Walking alone was never about isolation. It was about preparation for a life designed to reflect His glory and to align perfectly with His divine plan. Nafi, experiences that once felt like setbacks now reveal themselves as essential steps in the formation of a heart capable of embracing heaven's blessings. In this sacred revelation, she understands that walking alone with God has cultivated resilience, discernment, and spiritual intimacy that cannot be acquired any other way. Every lesson learned, every trial overcome, and every moment of surrender has deepened her dependence on God, allowing her to step confidently into the life He has prepared. She sees now that nothing was wasted. No tear, no unanswered prayer, no delayed promise. Each element was part of a blueprint to ensure that when the time comes, she will receive what is perfectly aligned with her purpose, and she will walk in it with wisdom, gratitude, and unwavering faith. This moment also brings clarity about the people and relationships that will enter her life moving forward. Those who align with God's plan will arrive at the right time, carrying support, encouragement, and partnership rooted in spiritual alignment rather than convenience or fleeting emotion. She's no longer drawn to what feels safe or familiar. Her heart is drawn only to what reflects God's design. This discernment protects her, ensuring that she invests her time, energy, and love into what is eternal and spiritually fulfilling. The life that unfolds from this point is not defined by human expectation, but by divine intention. And as she embraces this truth, she is invited into a deeper participation in God's purpose. She understands that walking alone was never about deprivation, but about empowerment. It prepared her to receive not just blessings, but destiny-aligned experiences, relationships, and opportunities. She now walks with a sense of peace, confidence, and anticipation, knowing that God's timing is perfect and that His guidance has never failed. Every step taken in faith positions her to walk in fullness, guided, protected, and elevated by the Creator. If you have walked through seasons of solitude, refinement, or redirection, and you see the purpose God has been shaping in your life, leave a comment saying, "I am walking with God." Share your experience and inspire others who may be learning to trust the process. And as you reflect on this journey, take a moment to like this video and make sure you are subscribed to the channel, because God's guidance continues to unfold in ways that can transform your life. There is more to come, more lessons, more clarity, and more blessings waiting for those who choose to walk fully with Him. Keep your faith, trust the timing, and embrace the path God has set before you.